Hello summoners and welcome to the Mobalytics top 5 mages for mid lane, climbing, and solo queue. Now this list is going to contain a few burst mages, a few control mages, standard mages, kind of all in the category of mages. But this list of top 5 champions are probably going to be your best bet when it comes to playing mages mid lane and the things that you can do and use to climb and win games in solo queue. Starting off on our list, it is Taliyah. Now Taliyah's competitive popularity and her high elo popularity are off the charts, and the reason for that is simply because she's just so good at what she does. Taliyah has great roaming potential as she has her passive and her ultimate to help her move around the map. Her wave clear is great with her Q, and if you take a minion dematerializer, you're probably going to be able to clear the wave and move around and have pressure. A lot of the champions on this list will have what we call pressure, and in League of Legends, pressure just means that you're always able to have either pushing priority or lane priority in your lane, and that means that you allow yourself to have pressure around the rest of the map. Taliyah and Twisted Fate, who we'll get to in a second, are no exceptions to this. They have so much map pressure because they have great wave clear, and then they're able to move around and use their ultimates to apply pressure to other lanes. As for Taliyah, she definitely has a little bit of a learning curve. Her combo of using her W into her E is kind of weird and not exactly intuitive, but she's not incredibly hard to play. For Taliyah and a few other champions on this list, learning the macro side of the game is going to be much more important than mechanics for most of the time. For runes and builds for Taliyah, it's going to look something like this. Summon Aerie is the most common and pretty much go-to keystone rune, and then you basically want to go for Inspiration secondary, that way you're able to get yourself a minion dematerializer and some boots. For the next champion on our list, it's Vladimir. This guy has insane laning pressure because he has decent wave clear, he can always sustain himself back up, so he's pretty much always healthy and can stay in lane forever, and in late game team fights he becomes a monster. His W obviously is very frustrating to play against, and he can dive you at will without any problems at all, and he can easily be able to space well in team fights, dive to your backline, and blow people up. Vlad is a pretty common ban in higher ranks now, and he doesn't see too much competitive play in mid lane. He's mostly a top laner, but what makes him so good for mid lane is that he has decent matchups in solo queue for the things people play. But in competitive play, he definitely has some worse matchups like Azir, who outranges him. What you'll find playing Vlad is that some of his mechanics aren't exactly intuitive, just like Taliyah, where you need to use your ulti, but then you can also use like your proto belt in your W, you can use your E in your W, so it might take you a few games to pick him up, but his baseline skill level, his skill floor is very low because you can kind of just spam Q and heal up. For the runes and the build, you're going to want to look at Unsealed Spellbook and stick to this one. This is for a few reasons. Firstly, it allows you to take Ignite in the laning phase and look for some early cheeky all-ins. Then you can swap to Teleport in the mid game, constantly TP back to your lane and continuing shoving and pressuring. And then lastly, for late game team fights, if you need a cleanse or if you need a ghost to get to the backline, it's really nice for Vladimir. You are pretty flash reliant, so the cooldown reduction on your flash as well is very nice. Next up, let's talk about Anivia. Anivia has been an underrated yet excellent pick for quite a while now. She did receive a few games of competitive play, but mostly she's gone untouched, and that's simply just because people underestimate her. Anivia is absolutely fantastic for solo queue because the low coordination means that your insane wave clear of just pressing R and clearing every single wave is very effective. And unless they have a Baron or a banner minion, it's going to be really hard to siege into you. Anivia has great CC, her wall is pretty good, her damage is insane, she can basically do it all, and aside from her relatively weak early game, she's a great pick, she's a fantastic control mage. Of course he's really good at her, but Froggen has proven time and time again that hey, if you are good at Anivia, and she does have a pretty big learning curve, you can be god for solo queue and have great win rates. You will actually find that in higher elo games, there are quite a few Anivia one-tricks and they have great success. For runes, there are some Anivias that do like Arcane Comet, but we're going to recommend you stick with the spellbook, although Comet might be a little bit easier to understand why. If you want to go Comet, make sure you take Teleport, that way you have that teleport pressure, but if you go Unsealed Spellbook, you can start with a heal or Ignite, then switch to your TP. Everything with Anivia is going to be about that scaling, so make sure you grab yourself a Tear and a Rod of Ages and scale up and take that Gathering Storm. Shockwaving her way into the 4th spot, it's Orianna. Ori is probably the most standard mage in the game. She has everything: wave clear, burst, crowd control, anything that you need out of a mage, Orianna is going to have it. She's a widely popular pick in competitive play for a good reason, but she's also not too bad for solo queue. Her learning curve comes from learning how to use her ball, keeping in mind that you can also hide it in terrain and hide the ball and look for big shockwaves. Mostly learning the weird skill shots and the weird mechanics behind the ball is going to be where the Orianna learning curve comes in. You have great shielding for your team as well, and you have fantastic wave clear, and now with the tier buff as well, it makes the item Archangels incredibly good for her. You get a lot of AP, you get mana, and you get CDR. It's everything that Orianna will want. Orianna has a pretty good laning phase as well because you have wave clear, you have a little bit of poke and some good range, and because of your passive, you always have pushing advantage for the most part because you can continually auto the wave. For the runes in the build, Summon Aerie makes the most sense because you can also use it to shield your teammates. Just as much as you can deal damage with Aerie, you can also use it and shield people. Last, but absolutely not least, it's Twisted Fate. TF is the god of solo queue, and he's always one of the best recommendations for playing mid lane because you can just help out so many lanes and do so much. Your point and click gold card is super OP for solo queue, and you can do a lot of things with the champion. You can always roam. Your laning phase does kind of suck, but it doesn't necessarily matter if you take minion dematerializer and spam push the wave. And this guy does everything that you need out of a mid lane champion. I always love when people pick Twisted Fate on my team. It feels like a lot of people in other regions besides Korea are really scared of him, and that's probably because of the way his pick a card and his ultimate work. It is a little bit counterintuitive, and the pick a card is strange how it cycles through even though you're not really using the ability, but once you get used to it, he's not incredibly difficult, but it's more of the macro side that makes him hard. What you can do if you kind of want to be a little bit cheesy is take Resolve Tree secondary and kind of just stay in lane and farm forever until you're able to get your 6 as Twisted Fate. It's also worth noting that you don't necessarily have to take Unsealed Spellbook. In some matchups it might be a little bit better to take Arcane Comet, but in most situations the Spellbook is going to be your go-to rune. If you don't want to go for Resolve secondary, you can definitely take Sorcery, that's perfectly fine as well, so figure out what works best for you. Anyway guys, this has been the Mobalytics top 5 mid lane mages for climbing and carrying solo queue. Make sure you leave a comment down below who you want to see for the next top 5 video next week, and let us know what you thought of this one in the comment section down below. Make sure you leave a like and subscribe and check out the product at mobalytics.gg and follow us on all our socials. Thanks so much for watching, and make sure to check out our tier list later on down the week.